Hello, everybody. Welcome to Chloethedev Unfiltered. I'm going to be doing another paper review. I'm hoping to get through chapters 8, 9, and chapter 8, Practice versus Theory, chapter 9, the conclusion, and the appendix all done relatively soon, but I don't know if that'll happen because Bianca gets home in around 20 minutes. So we're just going to see what we get and get into it. And feel free to to go through the rest of these paper reviews. I've done a few videos going through the first, 7 chapters. So let's get started. Practice versus theory. And then I guess the notes for this paper are consider reorganizing this section. Ethereum's practical implementation has a few design decisions that are different from GASPER. So this paper in 11 is the specifications for Ethereum 2.0, I'm pretty sure, and is driven by some desirable features of the beacon chain. Our protocol, GASPER, is meant to be a clean protocol that captures the theoretical core of the beacon chain, which is more mathematically traceable to study. In this section, we consider the difference between GASPER and the actual implementation. We seek to pragmatically cover the main concepts without getting lost in the much messier analysis a rigorous study of adding all of these details would require. 8.1 Sharding. This paper is motivated by the Ethereum 2.0 beacon chain, which is the main blockchain Ethereum 2. Design that stores and manages the registry of validators. In this implementation, a validator is a registered participant in the beacon chain. Individuals can become a validator of the beacon chain by sending Ether to the ETH1 deposit contract. So above, I have some rocket pool validators that are awaiting activation. I had to send ETH to the ETH1 deposit contract to get those validators to start awaiting activation and waiting to go. As in GASPER, validators create and attest to blocks in the beacon chain. Attestations are simultaneously proof of stake votes for a beacon block, as in our design, but also availability votes for a shard block, which contains data in a different shard chain. This concept of sharding creates interesting engineering and mathematical questions outside of the scope of this paper, which is limited to the beacon chain. So this paper is only about the beacon chain, not about sharding and all that stuff. As well, what you see above is just the beacon chain and a validator attaching to it, attesting on certain, data, different checkpoints. Implementing the view. In a pure protocol, such as GASPER, we can treat views and related concepts as abstract mathematical concepts and validators as perfectly reasoning agents with infinite computational power, which is obviously not true, but in this protocol, that's the case. In practice, validators will not be directly reasoning with a graphical data structure of a view. Instead, they will use software to parse the view given to them and follow the protocol. So there's no perfect view in a real validator. There's only the view that they are able to see according to what they are able to see locally, and then the software takes that view and then does some sort of computation on top of it. Thus, in the actual implementation of Ethereum, validators run a program that updates the store, which is basically a representation of the view. So I think it's Prism's running on the rocket pool up there, and so I think it's Sigma Prime. The Sigma Prime client will help me do all that. The store as the input for LND Ghost fork choice rule is updated whenever a block or attestation is received. So you can see again different slots and epochs, and so each slot is kind of like a block, and each slot gets received, and then the store is the input of the fork choice rule. The beacon chain also keeps track of a state, a derived data structure from the view that has kept track of stake-related data. Obviously, mistakes when interpreting these structures and their updates may cause issues with safety and liveliness not related to those coming from GASPER itself. So if your node has issues, then you might have issues with, so on Madasha, for example, there was an issue with a client with time syncing, and so a lot of clients came offline, and nothing was wrong with the GASPER protocol. It actually worked perfectly, I suppose, but there was still an issue in terms of not liveliness, but in terms of finality and all that kind of stuff. Even though in our work we limit our analysis to the mathematical parts of the protocol, we remind the reader that these other issues are also important. Security holes arising from a carelessly implemented protocol at the software level are not protected by the mathematical guarantees of GASPER. So for example, let's say in Madasha, you have some mathematical guarantee about safety and liveliness and justification and finality. But if you had some issue where, half of the nodes in the network had some sort of implementation software detail, where it was impossible to add new ETH let's say to the network, and 90%, or sorry, I don't know, all nodes came offline, or it was impossible to reach that 512,000 ETH staked because the inactivity leak would drop Madasha below that amount, and let's say there was some implementation bug which didn't allow new users to deposit more ETH to the contract. That would be a way in which the chain would be broken forever, and there'd be no way to get the chain running again into finality, which would be a safety issue. 8.3, attestation consideration delay. So this is the delay that we're talking about above. In the Ethereum 2.0 beacon chain implementation, when a validator is supposed to attest at slot N, he or she runs the LMD Ghost fork choice rule, but only considers attestations that are at least one slot old. In our terms, the view used as input for the fork choice rule contains all valid blocks up to the slot N, but only contains valid attestations up through slot N-1. Whereas in GASPER, specifically, we consider all blocks and attestations in the validator's view. So everything the validator is able to get into the view, we consider that as being part of the protocol. This one slot delay protects validators from a certain class of timing attacks, in which Byzantine validators eagerly broadcast slot N attestations rather than waiting for the N1/2 when they are supposed to attest. This allows them to theoretically take advantage of network latency to split the vote from honest validators to keep the chain in a state of equivocation. So basically, they're going to attest to a block or a slot early, which would allow other validators who are just voting on whatever comes up first to vote on that, which would cause some sort of issue. This is an important attack to counter, as publishing attestations at the wrong time in a block is not a slashable offense. So a malicious actor or malicious validator could do this and not be slashed. Since the adversary can, a priori, fake timestamps, though it is possible to design a sophisticated blockchain based on GASPER that makes faking timestamps harder, it doesn't make much of a difference because faking, if someone will control my node and then fake timestamps and just control the time on my computer or my clock, they can cause slashable offenses, which would be a really big issue in terms of for validators and users. Luckily, we covered the one-shot delay attack in our analysis of the equation game, see Appendix B. We'll do that later. And conclude it is plausible for the attack to be effective in the pessimistic regimes. However, the probability Byzantine validators succeed with this particular part of attack is greatly lowered even in pessimistic regimes if we consider the attestation consideration delay. So that's why it shows you that even in this pessimistic scenario, yes, it is possible to have some sort of issues where a time attack could cause problems, but if you have some sort of attestation consideration delay, which is that N+1/2, I'm pretty sure that is where you are able to remove that kind of issue. But we'll go through it more in Appendix B. Specifically, this delay makes the equivocation game winning rate as analyzed in Ethereum 7.4 at least R equals 2/3. As long as an honest validator creates a block with probability at least 2/3 in the worst case. So you need one honest validator at some point to create a block, and then eventually all the other honest validators should vote on it. But anyways, so that winning block, and then that winning block needs to be justified. So it needs a winning weight of at least 2/3 over 1/3, which would be 2/3 minus 1/3, which is at least 1/3. For that block. This argument heuristically shows the probabilistic liveliness for the actual protocol comes with even better guarantees than that of GASPER. A rigorous analysis proof of this intuition may be interesting future work. I would love to read that. 8.4, attestation inclusion delay. In GASPER, when a validator proposes a block, he or she includes all attestations in his or her view. So you need to propose a block and then include all the attestation that you are seeing at that time. In the actual ETH2 beacon chain, there is an integer parameter for the attestation inclusion delay, say n, such that when a validator proposes a block, he or she only includes attestations that were made n slots ago. So you're only including attestations that are recent to the block that you're proposing. The purpose of this attestation inclusion delay is to prevent centralization and reward advantage in the case where block time is super short. Currently, the beacon chain expects a new block every 6 seconds of slot. I think that's been increased to 12 seconds slots. If the slot time is short and the latency of attestation propagation is high for normal nodes in the network, then highly connected nodes might be able to get attestation data faster and be able to publish them faster, which may correspond to various advantages in real life. Which, remember, when you're in a tester or a validator and you vote on a certain piece of data, there's an attestation delay where you want it to be a delay of 1. So you want a block to be proposed, and when you see that block, you want to be attesting to it in the very next block to get the highest rewards. The longer you wait, the lower your rewards are. So with block times being only 6 seconds, it doesn't give much time to get in those 6 seconds. If you start halfway through, you only give you 3 seconds to really get your attestation in, and then for the next block. Whereas now there's 12 seconds, it gives you more time. For example, this can happen when the time slot is less than twice. This can happen when the slot time is less than twice as long as the average attestation block propagation time, and if the latency is much higher than the half slot time. So this is saying if latency is greater, so if half slot time is 3 seconds in a 6 second slot, if the latency is greater than that, is greater than 3 seconds, and attestation propagation time is higher, then you're going to have some issues with what I said, but this is like the nice little one sentence way to put it in nice little math terms. The enforced delay allows attestations to disseminate more widely before they can be included in blocks. So attestations are put out into the view. Validators are able to get those attestations, and it gives you more time before you're able to actually get those in view and attest to them. Thus, nodes have more of an equal opportunity to capture the attestation inclusion rewards for proposing blocks. The plan is to tune the attestation inclusion delay in the range of 1 to 4 slots, depending on real-world network data. So I guess this will depend on how things happen in the real world, and between 1 and 4. Smaller values improve the transaction processing speed, and larger values improve decentralization. So personally, I hope we'd be somewhere like 4 slots or above in the beginning, and then over time, hopefully we'd reduce that number as latency is proven to be lower, as consumer hardware gets better, and yeah, just promoting decentralization on the base layer, and on layer 2 and rollups, you can do whatever you want. 8.5, a 4-case finalization rule. While definition 4.4 captures the clean version of the mathematical idea of finalization, Ethereum 2 uses a reduced version only looking at the last 4 epochs for practicality. In particular, let B1, B2, B3, and B4 be epoch boundary blocks for consecutive epochs. So there's 4 epochs. Each of these blocks are epoch boundary blocks, with B4 being the most recent epoch boundary block. So B4 is the most recent epoch, and 1 is the furthest epoch away. If B1, B2, and B3 are justified, and the attestations that justified 3 have equal B1, we finalize B1. So what it's saying is, if the same nodes that justified B3 have also justified B1, so they're the same chain, then B1 is finalized. Okay. If B2 and B3 are justified, and the attestations that justified B3 have justified B2, we finalize B2. Okay. If B2, B3, and B4 have now been justified, and the attestations that justified B4, so now we're talking about this block here, have also justified B2, we finalize B2. So we're using like a very randomized mix of these rules. But anyways, and then if B and 3 have been justified, and the same attestations that justified this 4th block or this 4th epoch have also justified the blocks in B3, then we can finalize B3. So this is kind of going to show that in this block of B4, assuming these things are justified, and B4 is justified, if B4 is justified and the attestations from B4 have also justified B3, then B3 can be finalized. But that's only if I guess what you might see is if things are taking longer, most of the attestations from block 4, I would assume would be on block 2, and therefore block 2 would be finalized as we're looking at block 4, and usually be 1 epoch behind, but what do I know? I need to look at this stuff more. These are special cases of definition 4.4 for cases where k equals 1, the first two, and k equals 2. The idea here, so k equals 1 is you're finalizing the block right after the one before 2 has been justified. And then k equals 2, I guess there'd be specific instances where k equals 1 isn't the case, and therefore you are finalizing a block like 2 behind the most recent justified block. This means that only 1 epoch boundary blocks up to 2 epochs in the past can be newly justified and then finalized, which gives 4 cases. Perfect. See figure 9. From left to right, examples of cases 1 to 4 respectively. Both red and blue colors indicate justified blocks, where the blue blocks are blocks that are now finalized because of the observed justification, shown by double arrows. So these blue blocks are finalized, these red ones are justified, and so you are seeing how you can get block 1 to be finalized, as we see block 3 is we observe the justification of block 2 and block 3. So again, because block 3 is justified and block 1 is, and block 2 is, block 1 is finalized from what I understand. Now going to case 2, I think you're getting something similar. We're not even looking at block 1 anymore. We're just looking at block 2 and 3. And because block 3 has given the weight to block 2 is finalized and block 3 is still justified. Now here we're assuming that, again, all of these have already been justified. So this is justified, this is justified, this is justified. In this case, B2 is finalized now because B4 has provided the weight for that. And here B3 is finalized because B4 has provided the weight here. 8.6, safety, dynamic validator sets. So this is how we are now having not just stable sets. These validator sets, these pools, can be dynamic and they can change. In our previous discussion about safety section 5, we assumed a static validator sets, meaning that sets of validators cannot change over time. Recall that our main result, theorem 5.2, tells us we're able to catch n/3 weight worth of validators validating the slashing conditions if safety is broken. However, in practice, we would like to support dynamic validator sets, meaning that the validators are allowed to activate, enter, which is what I have going above, awaiting activation is what happened to my 3 validators, and exit the validator set over time. So eventually, give it maybe a year or so, you'll be able to exit. It'll take about, I think, 4 months to fully exit your nodes from the network. I assume a lot of that will be obscured away with application layer things that will applications at the application layer, which will abstract some of the complexities of this and allow you to withdraw your stake quicker if you have high reputation and stuff like that. But anyways, this means Byzantine activators can act maliciously, but they leave to avoid their stake being slashed. This setup reduces the number of active validators we can punish for violating slashing conditions. Definition 8.1. We define activated and exited validators with respect to 2 validator sets, V1 and V2, assuming that V2 is a validator set later in the time compared to V1. And then we define a active or validator V1 and validator 2. The validators who activated from V1 to V2 to be the set of validators who are not in V1 but are in V2. So, and E for V1, V2 are the validators who exited from V1 to V2. So the V1 and 2 are just time periods, and when you exit as a V1, you'll eventually be a V2, and when you're activating right now, I'm in A1, and soon I'll be A2 as I activate. First, we note that our key ideas for section 5 still hold. To make it clear in our language, we write them as follows. Again, math is beautiful because all of this writing is in English, and I read it in English, which is great. But this, in my opinion, really helps to make things clear for anyone in any language of how this all works. So suppose we follow dynamic validator sets in a view of G. If B1, F1, and B2, F2 in the view of G, of F, conflict, then there must exist 2 justified pairs, block L at a certain epoch and block R at a certain epoch in the view of G, and 2 subsets. You have validator 1, which is the element of validator of block 1, and validator 2, who I guess is validating on this other block. each with weight at least 2/3 of the stake of its corresponding attestation epoch, such that their intersection of V1 and V2 violates S1 or S2. Okay, I understand what it's saying so far. Let's look at the proof. The proof is essentially identical to that of lemma 1.5 and their reduction to theorem 5.2 to it. The only difference is that we must rephrase the conditions of lemma 5.1 as conditions about the validator sets at the block at the time of their attestations. As in the proof of theorem 5.2, if we have two conflicting blocks, which is not allowed to happen, you got to figure out which one's the truth. And remember, blocks come in pairs, so block 1 and block 2 at different epochs, I guess, or the same epoch but different times. Doesn't really matter. Then either F1 equals F2, so they're the exact same epoch, or the epochs are different. I guess obviously these are one or the other. If the former is true, then we can set these two blocks are the same, I suppose, and okay, so it's saying if the former is true and they're in the same epoch, then it looks like there's two different blocks to satisfy our claim. If I guess if the epochs are not the same without loss of generality, if F1 came before F2, so these epochs, Okay, they're saying if they're not equal, then F1 has to be less than F2. We know that since the block 2 is finalized, so it did get finalized, block 2 towards block 2 prime is justified, is in the justification view of G, and we observe that block 1 is not an ancestor of this block prime of 2. We now have the setup for lemma 1.5, whose proof concluded there must be some pair of pairs, each of whose attestations have 2/3 of the stake and whose intersections violate one of these slashing conditions. So there should be a viable block in one of these two blocks, and one of the there should be an area where one of these slashing conditions has been met. In our setup, we suppose that the last finalized block observed in a view was block 0 at time 0, and the view contains two conflicting finalized blocks, block L and block R, that were published at time L and time R respectively. Let the blocks be block 0, block L, and block R have validator sets validator 0, validator L, validator R respectively, and let the attestation for L be the weight of all the attestations for validator 0, validator L, and the attesters and exits are the weight of E. Okay, yeah, activations and exits. Okay, activations and exits be the total weight of activations and exits between validator 0. I think it's at time 0. Validator sets 0 and validator sets of L respectively, and similarly define the activators for R and the exits for R. Our goal is to see what stake worth of validators can be provably slashed in terms of the activations and the exits, which are numbers we can control via our activation and exit policies. Theorem 8.3, if a view contains two conflicting finalized blocks, as defined in our setup above, then the view has enough evidence to slash validators with total weight at least X minus W, anyways, whatever. Yeah. Anyways, proof. By assumption, block L and block R are finalized, so by lemma 8.1, we have quorums QL. Oh, so the quorum QL is a set of VL, and QR is an element of VR, both with at least 2/3 of their corresponding attestations, such that their intersections can be slashed. I think all this means is that it's very easy to tell. You have like a quorum or a vote of who voted or which validators voted for block L, and then you also will know which validators voted for block R. And if both of those blocks were taken, I would assume that you know both blocks in their own respective way have over 2/3 of the network voting for them in different epochs. or I guess it depends which slashing condition was met, but you should be able to know which validator set you can slash, VL or VR is what I would assume. We know the different sets created by the overlap of our three validator sets to be A, B, C, D, E, F, and G as in figure 10. So now we're going to see the fun stuff. See the validators 0, L, and R, and these are all the sets that may have voted on different parts. And then I guess validator C, this C section voted on all three. I don't even know who that would be. Figure 10, a Venn diagram of the initial validator set 0. So that's all the validators are. No, it's not all the validators. And two validator sets L and R. So I guess you start with this initial validator set, and then you have two potential attestations that are, or votes that validators can vote onto, and some vote for VR, and some vote for block R, and some vote for block L, and you kind of figure it out. And two sets and letters A through G pictorially represent how many validators are in each overlap. So you have the quorum of L and the quorum of R, and then you have the addition of quorum L and R as the sets together. The quorums L and R have overlapping validators between the conflicting blocks, block L and block R. Next, we wish to bound the intersection of the quorums QL and QR as depicted in figure 11. Let the validators of LR equal the validators R plus the validators, so L plus the validators R equals the CF. And then we have some beautiful proof that, again, I'm not going to read through, but again, this is just a proof to prove that this is true. You start from here, and then you come through to here, and believe me, in my discrete mathematics course, or my going through all these proofs, they all make sense once you do them, but it's just practice of going through them over and over and over again, and that's not what I'm doing right now. If we wanted to avoid negative signs in front of the validator sets, we could e.g. use, again, you're just trying to take away the negatives in front of here, and then you could change it and write it out this way, just math. As a sanity check, note that in the extreme case, no exits or activations, all the A's and E's are 0. So we recover the original bound of n over 3. So if there's no exits or activations, it's honestly fine. And as you have exits and activations, you could check the math as you add different variables there. Here are some examples. If we allow a constant stake of k worth of the new validators to activate per epoch. So this is also to figure out some safety bounds of how many validators can be activated in each epoch, or each slot. Whatever. I think it's probably per epochs here. Where T now is the epoch when we observe the conflicting blocks in our view, and T0 is the epoch of our last finalized block. We can do the same with exiting and obtain bounds on EL and ER. So you can actually stop people from exiting, or figure out, if there's a conflicting block and you're trying to exit, we're not going to let you exit for a certain amount of time to ensure that we have enough time to figure out which block was correct, and then slash you if you do something wrong. We can do the same with exiting and obtain bounds on EL and ER, possibly with a different constant in the same protocol. If we allow activating proportional to validator stake, so for example, in one epoch up to k times w, the validators can activate. Again, so just trying to figure out what the best way of activation is, then the bounds become exponential. In the limit, this becomes an exponential bound. So I'm excited to go through the ETH 2.0 paper and continue to see what ETH2 is actually using for these bounds. Because, for example, I'm waiting, I think it's a time bound for activation in the Genesis. It's 2 weeks or 10 days. But I'm not sure what the exit bound is. From what I understand, it's 4 months. It's for safety. So maybe it's just time bounds, just to create some probabilistically, 4 months is probably way more time than you would need. And same, 10 days to deposit is probably more time than you need. Our bounds can also take care of latency if we are prepared for up to delta epochs of latency, and we effectively add delta to computations where T now minus T0 occur in our bounds of agitations and exits, which we can then feed back to theorem 8.3 These bounds show a trade-off between the flexibility of entering and exiting the blockchain and the ability to catch malicious actors. Our static result, Theorem 5.2, has the intuition, if our protocol breaks safety, we can provably slash 1/3 of the validators to imply safeness of a protocol as long as we have a strong enough belief in the validators. Our dynamic result, Theorem 8.3, is of the more nuanced form. If our protocol breaks safety, then as long as the attackers cannot create a fork with long branch lengths, we can provably slash a little less than 1/3 worth of validators. This means pure GASPER is susceptible to attacks such as malicious actors shutting down the whole network for many epochs and then suddenly appearing with a conflicting fork. And so this is kind of what we're seeing in Madasha now, and I think this is what would be fun to try and attack the network doing, is because there's been such a long period of non-finality, could some attackers now try and create some chain for a long period of time and create some reorgs? In my opinion, it's hard to test these things out because the beacon chain doesn't have any state transition really, at least not in terms of like, functions and all that. So, no balance changes. And so it's hard to really attack, in my opinion, to figure out what you're trying to attack. But maybe, you could try and pull off some simple attack where you try and, have some validators that were in the network and then re-kick them out and see if maybe you were able to create a longer fork where you could change some rules. I think it'd be kind of hard to do, to test in real useful cases. That's my personal opinion. Such that we cannot slash much stake worth of validators since they have already exited during this time. That's why 4 months is a long time, because you could still slash them. Even if someone does something now, you have 4 months to slash people in. Such situations can be safeguarded in practice by simply not including old attestations into one's view, which is probably what's already happening in the current ETH 2.0 spec, for example, does not accept attestations more than 2 epochs old, which avoids this attack. So then there you go. In ETH 2.0, where I think we've gone like hundreds of epochs or maybe longer without finalization, maybe 2,000 epochs without finalization. But that's all right because, again, you're not going to look at any attestations more than 2 epochs old. So eventually, when the network starts finalizing again, over 66% of the active network being active non-malicious validators, then we should start seeing finalization again without any issues. 8.7, extreme cases and hard forks. Even though we have fairly unconditional plausible liveness with a 2/3 majority of honest stakeholders and probabilistic liveness under good conditions, it is important to take into account the worst case scenarios. In the case of extended forking and lack of finality due to lots of non-live, non-participating validators, which we have now, who are not necessarily malicious and thus not slashed, what we have right now. In Ethereum 2.0, Beacon Chain has a mechanism by which live participating validators on a fork retain their stake, whereas non-live validators bleed stake such that the live validators eventually become 2/3 majority. That's an inactivity leak, which is happening right now on Madasha testnet. Where are we? Live validators become in the magnitude of weeks, such that a case may happen if, for example, the global internet is partitioned such that half the validators are on one side and half are on another side. What you would eventually see is there'd be 2 different Ethereum networks, and in each different chain, they would both be totally fine and eventually would both be finalized, but they would be competing chains. A different extreme case is where a chain flip-flops continuously, such that there was no distinct partition. And instead, the majority just keeps switching forks each epoch, which would be horrible. Eventually, you'd probably just have certain validators say, okay, I don't care. Again, you'd be able to pick one. The client would be able to choose that, but for now, it would be an issue. The ultimate backup plan for this situation, or more severe cases, is making hard forks or manual forks, is what I'm saying. A client would just say, okay, you know what? We're going to pick one because it's been going on for too long. At which the community running a blockchain chooses to alter the consensus rules. Famous use cases include Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, or ETH versus ETH Classic. This might be due to upgrading or adding features, fixing critical issues in production, or addressing a fractured community or political split. Usually this results in a new set of protocol rules being run starting at some particular point in the blockchain, so the point of the split usually. It is important. It is an important engineering problem, again, outside our mathematical scope, that the state transition and fork choice functions can handle these changes smoothly. In most considerations, the HLMD Ghost fork choice rule would be untouched. However, when the alterations are deep inside the logic, considerations beyond the built-in forking mechanisms will have to be taken, and manual forks might be implemented. So this is talking like if you knew you had to make a change that happened like 2,000 epochs ago, for example, you couldn't just use HLMD Ghost as a fork choice rule to decide. You might have to actually completely change your algorithm to allow for like maybe governance-based fork choice. I know Vitalik was speaking on potentially having some sort of algorithm or consensus algorithm where you always stick to the same consensus rules unless everyone decides to switch, or 51% decides to switch. So I think this is where you can have some, maybe a governance token where you actually have some sort of value to this token, as in no one ever uses this token. This token is absolutely useless, but it is only used for governance in the sense where maybe you get like this token in proportion to your total stake on Ethereum 2.0. So for every ETH2 you received, you also received this ETH2 governance token. And this governance token had no value, but it was ERC20 and you were able to trade it. It can also be an NFT, which was tied to your account and increased with some integer of weight over time, the more you staked. It would be horrible for privacy. The point would be that when a when a fork needed to happen in the future, if it needed to happen, there would be no chance of forking unless 51% of the people who had this sort of weight, this voting weight, were able to vote for a fork. And it wouldn't be something that anyone with this stake could propose. It would be a client proposal, and with an extra safety that it wouldn't go through unless there was some sort of vote. I don't know if the vote would make sense to be some of the token, or if it would just be based on your node. But that's the way I see it potentially playing out if this kind of fork happened in the future with proof of stake networks. Conclusion. We presented an abstract protocol GASPER that combines LMD Ghost and Casper FFG for a full proof of stake based blockchain design. Our goal is to separate the mathematically clean part of Ethereum 2.0 design from the implementation details, which we discussed separately in section 8. This work also serves as a proof of concept of the Casper finality gadget applied to a complete blockchain protocol, which is super cool. I went through the Casper paper in this channel previously, and it was a very quick video, like a 1 hour something long, and it was a very quick one. And I like how this paper digs into, okay, how do you use the Casper paper in an actual blockchain? Finally, the tech to be used in, for example, providing probabilistic liveliness and or forming the equivocation game may be useful for other such protocols. Even though the actual ETH2 blockchain design skirts much of the worst case analysis, there will be patches such as found in Ethereum in section 8. So for example, the ETH2 blockchain it's saying is not perfect right now. It's just a beacon chain in phase 0, but there will be patches and updates to the blockchain that allow for phase 1, phase 2, and beyond. There exist many other proof of stake based protocols in the cryptocurrency space. Some examples include, and I will not go through these, but there's Tendermint, which I'll probably go through a paper review of because I've been meaning to go through it. A pure design that's a simplification of PBFT. And so I've also been meaning to go through the PBFT paper on this channel, so I'll probably do that as well. There's a Casper CBC, which I've never actually gone through. It's alternative proposal to Casper FFG, focusing on mathematical correctness by construction. Casper's CBC does not have fixed in protocol thresholds. Very cool. There's hot stuff, version 6, very similar to Casper FFG with a flexible mathematical framework. Key difference is that hot stuff uses exponential backoff mechanism to be able to make progress under arbitrary network delays. Cool. There's Ouroboros under so it's a synchronous protocol which assumes synchrony for fault tolerance and thus gets stronger 50% bounds for fault tolerance. And it uses the longest chain rule and reward mechanisms to incentivize participation and present passive attacks. In Ouroboros Preos, The protocol is updated in response to vulnerabilities against message delay attacks. So different Ouroboros platforms. There's Snow White, a protocol where the committee leader, we have committees here, can extend the blockchain with a block that includes a reference to the previous block. Seems normal. Similar to block dependencies. And a nonce that can be used to verify the block's validity against some a priori difficulty constant. Valid timestamps must increase. Makes sense. Any timestamp in the future will cause a chain to be rejected. So I guess you can't use a timestamp too far in the future. It must be the present timestamp. The issue I would see with this, with Ethereum, for example, is that not all network nodes are synced to the same clock, and that would instantly cause an issue with trying to have that. Participants only accepting incoming chains that have not been modified too far in the past, similar to accepting views within a certain number of epochs. So similar to what we have now, but again, this timestamp issue, which is pretty similar to Ethereum though too. You could only, although in Ethereum I think you could propose things pretty far in the future, and you just wouldn't put something into your chain. You wouldn't attest to something if it was far in the future, but it's not rejected. I don't think. But the client might reject it. NXT. So I've actually heard more about NXT and Ardor. My brother likes NXT. I think it's the same. Yeah. So NXT, I think they moved on to Ardor, from what I understand, if it's the same one. A proof of stake protocol has a finite number of tokens. NXT uses stake-based probability for the right to generate a block, but it imposes transaction fees to circulate currency since it does not generate any new tokens. NXT contrasts themselves from Peercoin, noting that Peercoin's algorithm grants more power to miners who have had coins network for a longer period of time. Which I don't like. It leads to centralization. Also, NXT, yeah, I'm pretty sure now is Ardor, and I'm pretty sure they've improved from NXT to Ardor. Thunderella is a proof of stake protocol that aims to achieve optimal contraction verification relative to message delay, assuming new conditions. A new leader will be okay, yeah. And you have Definity. I've heard a lot about Definity, so I'm going to read into it. Beacon notarization protocol that works with both proof of work and proof of stake. So blockchain agnostic, it seems. The system uses a random beacon that selects block proposers, and a decentralized notary chooses the highest ranked block based on a criteria described in the paper. Their analogous validators and committees are called replicas and groups, and their decentralized notary depends on the same Byzantine fault tolerance to notarize blocks and reach consensus. They only have a passive notion of finalization, so you don't have as much safety, I guess, in that sense, but the notarization process is quite fast, and blocks do get published in a timely manner. Replicas do need permission to leave the chain. I guess leaving pretty similar to ETH2, except for instead of needing permission, you need time. So I guess it's the same. If you ask permission, you could probably do some sort of proof check, validation that this validator is not malicious, and let them leave. In Ethereum 2.0, you have that check, but you also need 4 months to have greater safety. Yeah. Our goal is not to show that our design is strictly better than any of these other designs. All the protocols contain trade-offs, and I think that's the most important part. There is better or worse, arguably, but it's more about trade-offs based on different design goals and assumptions about the networks. Again, trade-offs, yes, but where I think you get most support is assumptions. What are you assuming that the network's going to look like, a live network in 6 months, a year, 5, 10 years potentially? Our design is guided by a balance between simplicity, understandability, and practicality, placing a mixed emphasis on safety and liveliness. For example, in the context of a proposed blockchain, is one where speed is less important than safety. Super important. As you could see, the slot time was doubled from 6 seconds to 12 seconds for that very reason. Having that really quick block time was posing some potential issues and risks in terms of safety and all that kind of stuff for nodes, and so they just doubled it. Let's keep it at 12 seconds. Acknowledgements. Okay, I mean, thank you very much to all these people. I appreciate it because I couldn't have read this paper without all you people putting it down on paper. These are all the papers that are part of it. and I will definitely. How long is this? The appendix is not too long. I'm probably just going to go through it quickly before Bianca gets home. And then once Bianca gets home, I'm probably just going to stop with the appendix and end the video there. So, technicalities of views. In section 2, we define the view as a streamlined treatment. In a streamlined treatment, we provide a more detailed treatment in this section that offers further intuition. First, we give a different definition from view that should seem more intuitive for some readers. We define the full view of a validator view at a given time, t, to be the set of all messages and timestamps that have been seen by the validator at that time. We can denote the full view as, full view at a full time. Similarly to the network view, we can also define a God's eye view, which is the full view of the network at a certain time. The full network view as the collection of all messages any validator has broadcast at any time in the network. So it's the full network view of any message any validator has broadcast. As with views for any validator v at any given time, t, yes, this full view includes all the messages for any full view of a validator at any time, though the timestamps may be mismatched. Machine overloaded happens often. With this definition, our definitions view and validator view and network view respectively are just subsets of the accepted messages in the full view and the view respectively. Now it is completely possible to describe everything in terms of views instead of views. In terms of full views instead of views. Again, getting validator issues, but I'm having no drop frames. My Wi-Fi seems to be fine, and everything else. So I might have to dig into that later, but for now it's fine. Sorry, I'm talking about the rocket pool nodes up above. However, there are many reasons why we work with views instead of full views in this paper, and why we leave the concept of full views to the appendix. Here's a few reasons. We can visualize views as a connected tree of blocks and attestations with edges corresponding to dependencies. To visualize full views, we necessarily have to use a possibly disconnected graph. Motivated by real-life concerns, a protocol working with full views would have to contain instructions that differ on how to handle messages a validator V has seen but shouldn't act on, as it depends on a possibly non-existent message V has not seen, versus a message a validator has accepted and fully understands. As an example, a cryptocurrency protocol may have to contain statements of the sort: when a full view sees a transaction about a coin B, if the parent block B of B exists recursively and are all signed correctly, then consider the transaction valid. So in phase 1 and phase 2, when we start getting transactions, the issues in this math is how do you validify that something is true before it's happened in a short amount of time. I think Starkware and different roll-up solutions will be really great with this. I know I was going through a workshop today with Starkware talking about how they have to have different prover times and verifier times and taking all this stuff off chain and verifying the data structure and how you can kind of create efficiency. So I think a lot of this off-chain information is what's going to be helping out with these on-chain validators very soon. Anyways, this is very clunky, whereas if parent-child relationship were dependencies when using views, this abstracts away the recursive checking logic, and we just need to say, when a view sees a transaction about a coin B, consider the transaction valid. We'll see what happens as ETH2 gets to transactions. It is always possible to have a protocol that works on views if message B depends on message A, but we receive B first, then working with views is equivalent to ignoring the existence of message B when making choices as a validator until A and other dependencies come. Makes sense. To summarize, even though the full view is somewhat intuitively easier to understand than the view is everything. Since all the dependencies are met in a view by construction, what the view sees forms a coherent state, where the validator can reason about any message with no ambiguity. So with a full view, you might have some messages that you should act on, but later, and you can't really tell. With your current view, you can know right away, should you act on this and attest to it, or should you not. You can know these things with the math above in the paper. Okay. B, equivocation game. Recall in section 7, we abstracted a single slot of GASPER into a one-slot game called the equivocation game, parameterized by V and a bunch of real numbers, where V denotes votes on two options, option 1 and option 2. In this appendix, we will give some further details and perform some simulations. First, we explicitly discuss how time and synchrony conditions are modeled in this game. 1, there is a single time period in this game formalized as the real interval 0 to 1. This interval corresponds to the first slot of time in GASPER. Perfect. Honest validators follow the following protocol. Vote at your time equals half for the option with the more total stake voted in your view. So you're going to look at your own view, find the vote with the highest active weight, and you're just going to wait half the time and vote on that. And hopefully you're doing that in the quickest time possible to get the highest reward. This protocol corresponds to the instructions in GASPER that attesters for slot I are supposed to attest at time I plus half, and tiebreakers are broken by a hash, which is arbitrarily but fixed value. The synchrony model, we assume that all validators have perfectly synced clocks, but each validator attempting to vote at time t actually votes at real time t plus x, rounding to inside the interval 0 1, where x is a uniform random variable with support, so it's going to be a really small number. But anyways, the point is that we're pretty much saying that yes, all clocks have the same clock, but we're going to have some variance of a tiny bit, and then independently resampled for each message. So we assume we all have the same clock, which we all kind of do it at the same clock. And yes, we all might be off by a little bit, but we can think of this thing as a timing error bound, accounting for clock differences, client-side timing issues example. So there might be a difference between NIM and Sigma Prime and Prismatic Labs and Teku and all these different validators. Clients might have the timing off by a tiny bit, and so this is kind of that timing error. So minus or plus this timing error, you should be good to go. When a validator votes at real time t prime, all the validators obtain the vote at time t prime plus some attester plus y, where y is a uniformly distributed variable with support of this other random amount. We can think of a as the average delay per message. So this is the average attestation delay, I guess, for a message, and E2 as a noise on top of the delay. So we're just assuming that there's going to be some delay, then plus some, some random noise. Combining with the previous point, we have that a validator attempting to vote at time t. So you're trying to vote at time t, okay? What's actually going to happen is your vote is going to be received by another validator at t plus some time to send the message plus x, which we've realized is this delay of your own validator, plus y, which is this, it's going to take time for your message to be sent, received, and all that. Where x and y are independently resampled for each event. So it's going to be random each time. It's not going to be the same exact time delay. It'll be different. For analysis in this section, we make the following additional assumptions and notations. Every validator has exactly 1 unit of stake, bearing further knowledge. So borrowing further knowledge, such as empirical data about validator stake distributions, this is the most intuitive choice for our toy model. We define NH to be greater or equal to 2/3 to be the total number of honest validators, which is equivalent to the total number of stake. In reality, and in section 7.7, we expect the number of honest validators to be a bit bigger than 2/3 plus n for a small, or e to the n for a small, like epsilon, whatever that, a little value. So we expect, anyways, similar, we define NB to be greater than n/3 to be the number of Byzantine validators. We use, I guess, probability or proportion equals NB over n to be the proportion of Byzantine validators. Finally, so yeah, Byzantine validators over total validators, from what I understand. Finally, for our computer simulations, we additionally set the parameters to validators is 111, honest validators is 74, and Byzantine there are 37. The total number of validators of 111 is based on 6 as a heuristic lower bound for making the committee safe. So what we're saying is 111 is the lower bound for a safe committee, which would mean that the lowest number of honest validators is 74, and the lowest number of malicious validators is 37. And I think ETH 2.0 uses a committee size of 128, so should be fine. Or at least, yeah. Erring on the conservative side, we picked the maximally pessimistic parameter. So this is a maximally pessimistic parameter of everything going wrong. We only have 111 committee members. We have 37 Byzantine validators. And yeah, we only have 111 committee members. Having more honest validators in this assumption significantly improves your chances of winning for this blockchain. So this is the first one, the pessimistic regime of high latency. This pessimistic regime is a mental experiment to show that under certain conditions fair to both sides, the power of collusion is enough to make the game favor the dishonest side. We assume that A, the delay for messages from one value to another, so same A as above, is big compared to E1, the error in timing of O. So we're using epsilon as error, and E1 is the error in timing of O. In this situation, we argue that the dishonest validators, you know what? I cannot remember if that sign is actually epsilon, and I keep saying it as epsilon, so we're just going to quickly Google the sign. Yeah, epsilon. Perfect. Let me go back to the paper. Epsilon 1. In this situation, we argue that the dishonest validators can perform the following smoke bomb attack at time close to half, but minus this this delay. All dishonest validators vote in a way that the votes are split between two options. So before all the honest validators are about to vote, the dishonest validators have already voted on two distinct options, for a total of dishonest validators, times n over 2 votes for each option, all with fake timestamps for a time close to half. So it seems like when you go to a test, these both options look real, they both look fine. When this attack activates from the view of each honest validator at time half, they will see some random votes from dishonest validators, as A is big compared to the error. So, I mean, what they're saying is we're going to see them. Like, the votes are going to be in by now. So they're saying as A is big in compared to the time it takes me to receive the message from the dishonest validators, all I'm going to see is these two dishonest votes. Thus, the dishonest validators and honest validators both end up splitting the vote. The dishonest validators end up splitting, Pn of the votes. And the honest validators split the remaining 1 minus P and probabilistically. Assuming the honest validators all have one stake, the honest validators' votes can be modeled by 1 minus P times M. Bernoulli trails between the two outcomes, ending up close to the normal distribution around a tie, which is not what you want. With a standard deviation proportional to the square root of 1 minus n minus p n votes. In particular, for a large n, it is very unlikely for one of the options to get anywhere near 2n over 3 stake worth of votes. Remark, as an extension of this example, we can also consider the case where the protocol tiebreaker is a flip a coin. This is the problem. The situation becomes even worse. The dishonest validators can simply wait until the end to vote. Because A is big compared to this error time, the honest validators are still essentially making coin flips since they have not seen any other votes. So you see these two options, one is probably correct, one is correct, one is not correct, but you really can't decide which one it is. So you just vote on some random one, and you just hope that you're correct. Our tiebreaker rule, vote for option 1 if there's a tie, solves this problem. The main takeaway here is that these protocols, including the tax on them, are very sensitive to small implementation details. So I guess this is the point where if you see things going back and forth and back and forth, you can just say when there's a tie like this, just pick one. And I think that's kind of the issue with a lot of these consensus algorithms. Not an issue is that a lot of times it seems like the simplest, always having a decision made is the best way to keep consensus. So, in Bitcoin, trying to find a leading zero, just find the zero and prove you found a zero. Easy to find consensus. So here, yeah, you're voting, but if you don't vote, there needs to be a vote. Or if the vote can't be decided, there needs to be a vote. And I think it would be great if a human elections kind of followed some of this, logic where, maybe someone should stay in power until people decide to vote them out. And I know there's lots of issues with this as well, in governance-wise. But I think that the idea that it takes a movement, it takes communication, it takes people come together to change governance, I think I kind of like that idea, is that things are set a certain way, and if you want to change them, you need to actually learn and get people together and convince people and then get them changed. And which is the way I think blockchains are now, and it's kind of why I like that governance structure. And I'm liking the way things are slowly progressing to more real-life governance systems. In Figure 12, we have 4 cases that demonstrate different outcomes of the pessimistic regime with, different kind of, times where it takes to send a message and different error sending times. This ensures that messages are sent at time t are received uniformly, randomly in the interval t plus 03. And I think it's saying that no matter what, with these parameters, you should be receiving a message within this time. Note that having a smaller error would be even more pessimistic, although almost ensuring that honest validators cannot see each other's votes. So I think this is an error boundary that you're saying, okay, you know what? Just because we know there's going to be some error, let's account for this much of an error, and you might, but it'll increase latency. But yeah, in case 1, dishonest validators vote much earlier than honest validators do. So most of the attestations made by the former are visible to the latter when they vote. Thus, the honest validators are likely to vote for the same option. For cases 2 and 3, dishonest validators vote closer and closer to when the honest validators do, which increases the power of the attack. So I guess what the problem is the closer the dishonest validators vote to the honest validators, the power of the attack is increased, but what I would assume is it's also harder to pull off the attack at the same time. In case 3, dishonest validators win at 42% of the time, which is way too high. In case 4, so let's start looking at these. In case 4, dishonest validators vote at the same time as honest validators. Because of the delay, the dishonest votes do not confuse the honest validators. So honest validators almost always win. And I think that's where it's cool. You gotta, exactly. So when you're performing this attack, you're trying to perform it closer and closer and closer and closer to the time when the honest validators are voting, but still within a appropriate enough time beforehand with a fake timestamp, so that honest validators are voting a bit early before they see other honest validators' votes. One way to mitigate this is to, when you see a vote at halftime, wait like a second before you are voting. But again, the protocol already seems to do this. So this is just, the dishonest validators are voting in this time frame. The honest validators are voting up here. So the honest validators are always voting around halfway, and the dishonest validators are voting very early. But if you wait as a validator to vote until this, so in this first example, as a validator, if you wait so this is the interval of possible time to obtain dishonest validators' votes. It seems to be clear that, a validator should be trying to vote near the end of this blue circle. So this is the honest validators voting frame. It shows here that if you vote too early, in any of these situations, you could have some sort of issues. So the pessimistic regime simulations like this, and each row has a different coordinated dishonest voting time, which affects the winning rates. Okay, so now we're going to go through 2 more quick scenarios, and then we're done. So you have the low latency, the optimistic regime. So this is what you want: low latency all the time for all your nodes connected to the network. For this regime, we go to the other extreme and assume perfect synchrony. This means all decisions are immediately propagated to all the values of the network. This is very unlikely, impossible to have. In this game, the moment one choice has a lead by default, everybody is aware and everyone's going to vote for it. Thus, the optimal strategy for dishonest validators is to keep the voting exactly at a tie, in which case the next honest validator will vote for O1 or such that O2, option 2, has one extra vote, in which case the next validator will vote for option 2. However, as it takes more votes to get the count to under option 1, the dishonest validators can really do no better than as if they had voted at the very end in the wrong direction, which will give us, man. This is unrealistic. It doesn't even matter. You win all the time. No one can ever beat it. That's not even fun. In between is more realistic. We make up with assumptions where somewhere in between, okay, these assumptions are fairly arbitrary and hopefully presents a realistic example. That's the whole point. This would be good to find principled bottom truth parameters somehow, such as after the actual blockchain is implemented. Yeah, so again, Ethereum, the Madasha testnet will give us good examples for this paper, for this. And I'm very excited for all the papers that are going to come out from the Madasha testnet, from the Zinkin testnet, from all of these testnets, Spadine and all that come out. In figure 14, we have 3 cases that demonstrate the outcomes of in-between examples with the message delay being 0.1, and these are the 2 values, so in-between latency. Thus, A is comparable to E1. Very cool. So we're assuming that the time it takes to send the message and the time it takes to put your message up is the same. Remember, we're adding that delay in to the equation. Avoiding the pessimistic case, but fairly big, avoiding the optimistic case, right? Making E2 bigger doesn't really change the results much until E2 becomes around the order of A. And again, checking this math is best done by inputting actual values into the equations above. In case 1, some dishonest validators vote earlier than honest validators do, and their smoke bomb attack has some impact. However, the amount of votes are not distracting enough compared to the amount of votes honest validators are able to vote following the protocol. In case 2, as we earlier discussed in the pessimistic regime, dishonest validators vote closer to when honest validators do, which boosts the effectiveness of the attack. So as you see, or as is shown, if dishonest validators vote too early, then honest validators, have to, is right here. It has some impact, but yeah, they're not distracting enough because, from what I understand, up here. Wait, is there an actual diagram of this? I don't think there is. Oh, there is. Sorry. Either way, as you can see, with normal latency, the chance of winning is quite high. Not that you'd ever even want. The chance of losing just sucks. Losing at all. Again. Let's assume, right, that if they vote too early, no issues. If they vote at this perfect time, and you can see it's a perfect time because the red circle in this one, the middle one, man. The red circle and the blue circle are touching, which shows you that it's the very end of when the dishonest validators would stop voting, and just when the honest validators would start voting. And so there might be some... there's going to be a lot of votes for the wrong option, and certain validators might get tricked. And yeah, that's the entire paper. I think I forgot to read out last sentence or whatever. In case 2, as we earlier discussed in the pessimistic regime, dishonest validators vote closer, which boosts the effectiveness. And in case 3, dishonest validators vote at the exact same time, and honest validators still almost win. So I hope you all enjoyed the paper. That's it for the Ghost paper. Bianca should be home any moment now, I hope. So yeah, I'm always spending some time with her, maybe with a dog park. Not really sure today, but tomorrow the goal is to finish the ETH2 economic review paper, and then I want to go to like PPFT, Tendermint. There's a bunch of other papers that I'd love to go through. But hope everyone enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please feel free. Please go through the papers on your own. I think it's pretty important to go through things on your own. Feel free to try setting up a rocket pool node. I have a video about me setting that up. Try setting up a NIM node on your own. I have a video about that as well. Just trying to teach people about all these cool things that are available in this new decentralized world that is being built.